You put the money in a can.
In the Medrash Mesechta Megillah, it says B'Achashverosh's feast, they would force people to drink wine from a putzka. It's a very large cup and was made of gold, and you had to finish the entire thing. They would force you to finish the whole thing. Called the putzka. But let's start off with tzedakah.
The Russian people, a lot of Russian Jews, and one guy he had been an artilleryman, during the war. I heard that the shul they had sort of thing called a purke. He would tackle away.
Wow, interesting. And we'll say two chapters of Tehillim for our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael.
Good to see you too, sir.
Lam Natsayach Mizmor LaDavid Yancha Dinoi B'Yom Sara Yisagavcha Shemer Lehe Yaakov Yishachai Zechar Mikodesh Mitzion Mitzadaka Yiskar Kol Michaisecha Veilas Vayadash Nesela Eaten Chal Chiva V'Acha Chalatzas Chayimale Neran Rabbi Shuasecha M'Shem Eleinu Nidgal Imali Adinoi Kol Mishalisecha Ata Yadat Yishia Adonai Mashiach Yaneu Mishmekach B'Gvurai Sisha Yeminoi Eila Berechev Eila Basus Anachnu B'Shem Adinoi Eleinu Naskir Hema Karu V'Nafalu V'Anachnu Kamnu V'Anisaida Adonai Yeshia Melech Yaneinu V'Yayim Kareinu. We're going to say chapter 150 of Tehillim. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, El B'Kadshai, Hallelujah, B'Kiyah Uzai. Hallelujah, B'Guraisa, Hallelujah, Karoi, Udai, Hallelujah, B'Seika Shofar, Hallelujah, B'Nevel V'Chinar, Hallelujah, B'Seifa Machal, Hallelujah, B'Minim V'Ugav, Hallelujah, B'Tziltzilei Shama, Hallelujah, B'Tziltzilei Serua, Koilan Shama, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. We have only good news here and in Eretz Yisrael. And today's shir, we'll El Nishmas, Mr. Ringler. If you have his name,
Asher Ben Yisrael.
Asher Ben Yisrael. Today's shir will be Leil Nishmasim. His Levaya, Rav Asher Ben Yisrael Ringler. Levaya, Mr. Shem will be, Mr. Shem will be today at 1 p.m. Passing by Yeshiva, 215 in Polet Tzedek Memorial Park Cemetery, Gibsonia, PA.
That was a show report.
Yeah, though we did not get much sleep last night. Okay, we'll continue here with the Gemara in Mesechta Megillah, Daf Yirches Amud Beis. In general, whenever you have a machlokes, a disagreement between Tanoim, sages of the Mishnah, usually we follow the majority opinion. There are sometimes when you do follow the minority opinion, if the minority opinion is being strict in certain situations, in certain cases. Over here in our Mishnah, we had two opinions. The opinion of Rav Moina in the name of Rav Yehuda, that if somebody started reading the Megillah and they paused, they took a break, which is long enough of the average time it takes one to finish the Megillah, then they have to read it again. The Chachamim, the majority opinion is that even if you took a long break, you came in the morning, you read half the Megillah, came in the late afternoon, read the other half of the Megillah, you're still Yotzei. We had in the beginning, Rav Yosef said halacha is like Rav Moina, that you must read them here in the Megillah again if one made a large interruption. So the Gemara started going back and forth a little bit between who is the author of these two opinions. So in the beginning we have Reb Ava, the name of Reb Yirmiyah, Amar Rav, halacha is like Rav Moina. Fine. Halacha is like Rav Moina. If one made an interruption in the Megillah, you must read the Megillah again. We quoted again from in the Yeshiva of Surah and Pompadisa, halacha is like Rav Moina. However, the caveat is Rav Bivi. Rav Bivi says, Masni Ipcha, he learned differently. We have the two opinions, Rav and Shmuel. Rav usually is halacha like him, bi isuri, whenever it comes to matters of prohibited, permitted, and Shmuel is usually halacha like him when it comes to money, to monetary matters. Until now, we've had Rav Yosef, Rav Abba, Rav Kahana, all learned that Rav rules like Rav Moina, that if one interrupted in the Megillah for a long interruption, he must read the Megillah again. Now we're going to go to Rav Bivi. Rav Bivi, Masni Ibcha. Rav Bivi taught the opposite. And Rav Bivi taught like this. Rav Amar Ein Halacha Karamayna, Shmuel Amar Halacha Karamayna. Rav is actually lenient, and Rav holds that the halacha is not like Rav Moina. Rav Moina says that if one interrupted the Megillah, he must read the Megillah again. And Rav is lenient, and Rav holds of the opinion that even if one interrupted the Megillah for a long interruption, you still yotze, you still fulfill your obligation, and you don't have to say it again. Now, Rav, he was the fifth, Rav Bivi, I mean, he was the son of Abaya, and he was the fifth generation of the Amirayim. But he had a tradition that Rav actually over here in this case was being lenient, not strict, and therefore if one made a long interruption in the Megillah, don't have to read it again. And Shmuel Amar Halacha K'Rabbaina, and he held that Shmuel is more strict, and Shmuel holds Halachas K'Rabbaina, that if one made a long interruption, let's say a 40-minute interruption in the middle of the Megillah, you have to read the Megillah again. And since when it comes to Isuri, so matters of faith, matters of religion, we follow the opinion of Rav, Halacha K'Rav B'Isuri. So therefore, according to Rav Bivi, would come out that Rav over here is being lenient. And if one made an interruption in the Megillah, you don't have to repeat it. And that is the halacha. And it's commendable to hear the Megillah again. But if you made a very long interruption, but if you do, you don't make a bracha, because halacha is like Rav Bivi, which says, like Rav, that halacha is not like Rebbe Moina. So we have two opinions or two versions rather, you could say, in what does Rav hold? What does Shmuel hold? Is Rav being more strict like Rebbe Moina? And that's a version of Reb Abba and Rav Kahana and Rav Yosef, or is Rav being more lenient, which is like the opinion of Rav Bivi? So which version is correct? So the Gemara will bring another statement of Rav Yosef, and it's interesting over here in this statement of Rav Yosef, he's sort of changing his mind from before. Sas Emes says he's not really changing his mind, but at any rate, Rav Yosef saying different than what he said before. Earlier in the Gemara, Rav Yosef said, halacha is like Rav Moina, and if one interrupts in the Megillah, they must read it again. Now Rav Yosef will say the opposite. Amar Rav Yosef says, Nekoit de Rav Bibi biyadcha. There's a Gemara there if you need, 18b1. You look on the screen, excellent. You can adopt the version of Rav Bivi. It means take in your hand, assume that what Rav Bivi said is correct. And Rav Bivi holds that Rav holds like the Chachamim, the majority opinion, which even if the lenient opinion, if you made a long interruption on Megillah, it's fine. And Shmuel is being more strict, like the opinion of Rav Moina, that if you made a long interruption in the Megillah, you are not Yotze, you have not fulfilled your obligation and must read it again. So adopt the version of Rav Bivi. Why? The Shmuel hu the chayesh lechida. For we know from other sources that Shmuel takes into consideration even an opinion which is not a majority opinion, a dissenting opinion which is a singular opinion, at times when that opinion is more machmir, more strict. Generally, halacha is like the majority opinion. There are times when halacha could be like the minority opinion if it's more strict. And Shmuel holds, he ruled that halacha is like the minority opinion in another situation. So therefore, it makes sense to say that Shmuel will be the one to hold the halacha is like Rav Bivi, who's being strict, although he is a minority opinion. So you could adopt the opinion to say that Shmuel is chayesh l'chida. Shmuel, he takes into consideration a single opinion versus a majority, versus a chachamim, versus sages, even if it's singular, if it's a case where it is being more strict. Now, to understand the next Gemara, let's discuss a little bit another topic, the idea of yibum and chalitza. Familiar with the yibum and chalitza? If I brought a few images up on the screen, I don't know, the quality might not be the greatest. This is a chalitza shoe. Yibum and chalitza is a very uncommon mitzvah, very rare mitzvah, you could say. Takes place today, sporadically. Although if you go online, you could see multiple videos of chalitza and yibum. Usually, it's sadly by an older couple who do not have children, and so they have to fulfill the mitzvah of yibum or chalitza. The mitzvah is as follows: if a man married a woman, they get married, and they did not have children, and then the husband passes away, sadly. Either he was young or whatever it was. The husband passes away. So now the wife is left, an almana, left a widow. There is a mitzvah for the husband's brother to marry his brother's widow.
And ordinarily it would be a sin.
Well, if she's a married woman, obviously she can't.
No. What I'm saying is that ordinarily you're not allowed to marry your. Oh, no. Sorry.
Right. If his brother's alive, his brother's married to her.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, if the husband is dead, I mean, we're still not be allowed.
So once if she had children, if she had children, and then her husband died, the husband's brother would not be allowed to marry her.
Does the husband's brother have to be single himself? Could he be married?
He can be married also, because from the Torah, a man could have more than one wife. I mean, the only exception would be if the husband only had one brother, and that brother is married to the widow's sister. I mean, two brothers married two sisters. Obviously, then he can't do yibum.
However, the point I'm trying to make is that I had read actually that ordinarily it would be a sin, but in this
if they had children, yeah.
But in this case, it's a mitzvah, so you
Right.
have actually.
Right, meaning if the brother who passed away and the widow, his wife, had children, then the brother who is alive obviously cannot marry the widow because she has children already. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. It's considered to be a kindness, a chesed for the brother who passed away, because he has no one to carry on his legacy. If he had children, even though he passed away, his children will carry on his legacy. But since he had no children, so the wife is doing a mitzvah for her husband who passed away by marrying the brother and carrying on the legacy of her brother. That's if the brother wants to marry her. If the brother, and she agrees, but if the brother does not want to marry her, so then there's a different mitzvah called chalitza. Chalitza is that the widow says, here's my husband's brother. They both go in front of Beis Din, say, here's my husband's brother, and he does not want to marry me. He does not want to leave a legacy for his brother. And it's a shameful thing that he does not want to leave a legacy for his brother. And certain things take place. One of them is that the widow takes off the shoe from the husband's brother, and it's called Beis Chalutza, and calls him the house of the shoe which was removed, because now the brother is saying it's shameful. He doesn't deserve to walk around, being that he doesn't want to preserve his brother's legacy. It's a special type of shoe that's constructed special for Yibam and Chalitza. Has to be a shoe which one could unbuckle even if someone doesn't have hands. There's a story of Avner, the general of Shaul HaMelech, when he came to make peace with David HaMelech, and David made peace with him, and Yoav, David's general, was very angry at Avner. So after Shaul's general Avner left, so then Yoav went over to him and says, I have a question to ask you. Could you show me how does somebody with no hands, a woman with no hands, how would she unstrap a chalitza shoe? So he bent down to show him how it's done, like with your teeth, it has to be done. And when he bent down, then he killed him. Right? Avner is actually buried, I think, in Hebron, right? So it's a special mitzvah to perpetuate the brother's legacy. And if the husband does not want to do it, so then if the brother does not want to do it, so the brother has to do chalitza. Chalitza is saying that the woman says he does not want to marry me, does not want to perpetuate his brother's legacy. And then they remove the shoe, the yarka b'fanav, you have to spit, to sit on the side in front of him. And everyone, it's usually done in front of a crowd for that, and everyone says, Beis chalutz hanal. Everyone has to call out, here's a brother his shoe is removed, does not want to do yibum, does not want to marry his brother's widow. Nowadays, probably I think since the times of the Goinim, it's almost unheard of to have actual yibum for the brother of the person who passed away, the brother of the man who passed away, to marry the widow. It's virtually unheard of. Different reasons are given. I think the most given reason is that very few brothers, when they want to marry their brother's widow, are doing l'shem shemayim, for the sake of heaven. So generally, we only do chalitza today. We don't do yibam. I know of certain situations, like a big poskim, a big oinim, who did yibam. They married their brother's widow. There are certain cases where that has happened, but it's very uncommon. In general, what's done today is chalitza. In some famous cases, is Dovi brought me up this one on the way. A lot of you remember the Atlanta ship, Atalenta, the Atlanta, which unfortunately was Jew against Jew. This was in 1947. In June, there was a ship full of weapons going to support the Eitzel and Lechi, and the Haganah had none of it, and they started shooting at the ship, and they blew up the ship with all of the ammunition on board. It was very sad. There were Holocaust survivors even on the ship. They jumped off the ship, swimming in the water. Fellow Jews shot at them in the water. Very, very unfortunate, sad story. But Haganah got its goal, unfortunately, which was, will rule over you through terror, right? No terror against the Jew haters, but terror is against the Jews who fight against the Jew haters. But unfortunately, an old story. But there's one of the people who died on the Atlanta ship. I don't have his name this second, but it's in the book by Aryeh Raz about Tzaddik of Yerushalayim, Aryeh Levin. Many of you are familiar with him.
Oh, yeah, he was the great-grandfather, somebody.
Robert Wasserman's wife.
Exactly.
Yeah. He's called the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim, the father of the prisoners and Jewish mandate. During the British mandate, he used to visit all the prisoners and, etc. A very, very special, unique person. Aryeh Levin.
He would do illegal stuff on their behalf.
Right. I mean, there's a book about Rabbi Aryeh Levin. There's a lot you can say about Rabbi Aryeh Levin. Tremendous stories. The story of the Lamed Hey, the 35 soldiers who were killed in a very brutal way. Between two kibbutzim, he identified them. Many. There's a whole book about the Aryeh Raz. The Rebbe actually pushed to have a book about him published. The Frierdiker Rebbe met him. Anyway, so Simcha Raz. So Aryeh Levin.
Yeah. The Rebbe, Simcha Raz had a Yechidus Rebbe, and the Rebbe started asking him about questions about Aryeh Levin, and then encouraged him to start writing about him. And that's how Simcha Raz started his he was a journalist, but he's starting writing books. The Rebbe told him to, spread the stories that he had.
So the Aryeh Levin, Shalom Aleichem, Shmuel, the whole Gemara we're talking about now is about Shmuel. Shmuel, many times, he would go against everybody else if it was a more strict opinion, more stringent opinion. So Aryeh Levin, he had a dream that he knew that particular soldier because who was already arrested once, so he knew him from prison, right? He had a dream that this person who was killed came to him in a dream and says, please do me a major favor and arrange a chalitza to be done for his wife. And he passed away, he didn't have children, and to arrange a chalitza to be done for his wife. And Rabbi 11, he had to find out where the brother lived. I'm not sure if he lived in Eretz Yisrael or he lived in somewhere else, maybe in out of Eretz Yisrael in Spain. I don't recall the exact details. It's printed up in that story. And Rabbi 11, he arranged the details, and he did it with a lot of effort, and he arranged that the chalitza should happen. And then he had a second dream where that soldier came over to him and told him, "Thank you very much, you put me at ease." So we do see that there, until the chalitza or yibum is done, there's still a connection between the brother who passed away, the husband who passed away, and his wife. And even more of a connection, that connection now sort of transfers to the man who passed away, brothers. It's called a zika. It's a connection. They're not married, but there's a potential marriage, meaning at this point, the widow is only able to marry one of this man's brothers, one of her previous husband's brothers, of the husband who passed away. Preferably the oldest brother, but any of the brothers could either do yibum or chalitza. But there's something called a zika, a connection, which is between the woman, the widow, and her husband's brothers. Rogachover Gaon, we've mentioned him multiple times, a tremendous Talmid Chacham, tremendous Gaon. He had two daughters. One of his daughters, his daughters married his top Talmidim, his top students. And they were both tremendous Gaonim. One of them, I think his name is Goldfarb, and Goldfein. He was a Rav in Moscow till 1938. He passed away. By 1937, he passed away a few months after his father-in-law. He had two sons, and we don't know what happened to them. The two grandsons were very close to the grandfather, the Rogachover. And then the Rogachover had another daughter. I don't remember her first name right now. Maybe Yehudis, married to a very big Talmid Chacham whose last name was Citrin. And her husband, unfortunately, also passed away very, very young. And they had no children. And so therefore, she had to do yibum or chalitza. Obviously, we do chalitza. Now, the problem was the Rabbi Citrin, he had two brothers. One of them was in Moscow. He was a very fervent communist. As a matter of fact, I think he was even sent on a mission to somewhere far out, like in the Urals or something. They couldn't get in touch with him, try as they might, from Latvia, right, to where Rogachev was, to find him. They couldn't even find him or contact him. They couldn't do chalitza with him. And the other brother lived in Germany, and he was very secular, very anti-religious as well. Two brothers of Rabbi Citrin. Unfortunately, I'm saying there was a very common, widespread phenomena, especially back then. So they tried getting a chalitza from the brother who lived in Germany, and it was a lot. It was a lot of meaning. Could he do chalitza even though he doesn't believe in the idea of chalitza? So Rogachev Gaon was saying he's allowed to, and bringing proofs for it. But the local rabbis over there in Germany were saying no, he's not allowed to do chalitza because he's not religious. And it was going on back and forth, and there was many letters going on for about 2 years between the brother, the Rogachev Gaon, the rabbis in Germany. And then the rabbis in Germany says, okay, Rogachev Gaon, you sort of outclassed us in the scholarship, and we'll agree to you. However, at that point already, the brother did not want to do chalitza anymore, and she, unfortunately, she could not get remarried again. She was living in Eretz Yisrael. She moved to Israel. She was safe in Israel, and then when her father passed away, and all of her father's works, thousands of pages that he had comments and writings, there's nobody taking care of it. So she traveled back to Latvia, and she stayed there for the next 3 years. And she took pictures of all with a camera, rudimentary they had back then, of as many pages as she could, and sent it out in microfilm to the US. to any of their relatives. And she stayed all the way till the Nazis came. The last note that she wrote, she wrote a note in English with 2 lines. SS coming, that's it. Unfortunately, coming. She with her, and she saved a lot of the Rogatchover's writings, but unfortunately she got killed about a month after the Nazis came into Latvia. So, but thanks to her, we have many of the Rogatchover's writings. So she was someone who needed chalitza, but the husband refused to give a chalitza. Not the husband, the brother refused to give a chalitza. So the idea of chalitza and yibum, what?
He wanted to make yibum?
No. He was
Or friar?
yeah, not religious at all. So there's no actual familiar relation between the widow and her husband's brothers. There's a Torah connection, which is called a zika, sort of a connection between the brothers and the widow, which is that you are not married, but not married, meaning the husband's marriage, if they would do yibum, if they would do married, the husband's original nisuin marriage act would go on to the second marriage act of the if the brother would marry the widow. There is a yibum ceremony, but it's not an nisuin. You don't have to do a full nisuin, a full marriage, because the marriage was already done by the brother who passed away. It's called a yibum. It's sort of a lesser ceremony, a lesser level. Now, let's say Reuven passed away and he has his widow. His widow's name could be Dinah. Reuven has multiple brothers: Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zebulun, and Dan, Naphtali. So let's say Reuven is married to Dinah. Dinah had a sister, I don't know, Asnas, right? That's which was actually her daughter. But Dinah has a sister, Asnas. So let's say Reuven was married to Dinah. Shimon wants to marry Dinah's sister. So but Reuven passed away. Now, one cannot marry 2 sisters, obviously. Being that Reuven's wife passed away, and now Dinah has a zika, a connection to Reuven's brothers. So Shimon, who wants to marry Dinah's sister, Asnas, could he go ahead and marry Asnas or not? Do we say that the zika, this connection that Dinah has to Shimon, is a connection almost like a marriage, and therefore Shimon cannot marry Dinah's sister until he does a chalitza? Or let's say there's another Levi Yehuda. Let's say Levi does a chalitza, and then only afterwards Shimon can marry Dinah's sister, Asnas. Right? So do we say that it's a strong connection? Or do we say differently? Let's say again, there's many brothers: Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, 12 brothers. So do we say that the zika, the connection that the widow Dinah has to the brothers of her husband who passed away, is not a general connection, but it's a very weak connection? And therefore, let's say one of the other brothers, Levi, Yisachar, does chalitza or yibum, he either marries or does a chalitza ceremony with Reuven's widow. So we find out that the only brother who's really marriageably connected to Dinah was the one who actually did yibum or chalitza. And we find that out retroactively, and therefore, since a connection between Dinah and Shimon was never so strong, was never actually a marriage, it was only a zika. So could we say that even before that happens, even before chalitza or yibum happens, is Shimon allowed to marry Dinah's sister? Shimon allowed to marry his brother's widow's sister, if there's other brothers, because perhaps the other brothers could do yibum or chalitza, and the connection to him personally is not necessarily a strong connection. So that's in Mesechta Yevamos. It's very, you could say, involved, a complicated Mesechta. Mesechta Yevamos, it discusses this. And we have 2 opinions. The Chacham, the majority opinion, is more lenient and says that Shimon could marry Dinah's sister Asnas because it's not necessary because the connection is the Zika the widow has to him is a weak connection, and she could establish a Yibum or Chalitza with a different brother. And then there's a singular opinion, which is Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, which says that no, there is a strong connection between the widow and all the brothers, and therefore, until one brother actually does Yibum or Chalitza, the other brothers are forbidden to marry a sister of the widow. Of course, two brothers could marry two sisters, that's not a problem. But until then, until we find out which brother actually does Yibum or Chalitza, all the other brothers cannot marry a sister of the widow. And that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Shmuel, he paskins like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, even though he's a singular opinion. And in general, if you have the Chachamim, a majority, and the Yachid, the minority, usually you rule like the majority. But there are times when Shmuel will rule like the minority if they're being more strict. And this is one of those situations. So let's read that inside. So Rav Yosef says, adopt the version of Rav Bibi, the Shmuel the Chayesh Lechida, which he said that Rav was more lenient, like the sages, that one can read, one is allowed to make a long break during the Megillah and still continue later. And Shmuel holds of the opinion of like Rav Moina, which says that one cannot make a long break in the Megillah, only a short break, not a long one. Titznan, if we learned in the Mishnah in Mesechta Megillah, Staf Mem Aleph, Amud Aleph, regarding the idea of Yibum and Chalitza, if there are multiple brothers, a woman who her husband passed away, and then she's called a shemeres yavam, someone waiting for the yibum or chalitza to happen. So if a woman is awaiting her yavam, and then her husband passed away, his brother now wants to go ahead and marry her sister, the widow's sister.
I see. So there's not yet a connection, because in other words, at this point, it's like it should be just go back into them. It's not any,
correct.
Like, yeah, but afterwards, if it ends up being actually a Zika thing, then
right.
It's like, you're sort of like a husband.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I'd be
very good.
100% before. It's like it was a little terrific family tree over there, exactly.
Okay, good. Thank you. So if a brother of the husband who passed away wants to marry the sister of the widow, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, tell him, wait until your older brother, because preferably the older brother should do Yibum or Chalitza. The older brother should marry the widow or do a separation, which is sort of like a divorce. Wait until your older brother, but technically it could be any brother, preferably the oldest brother is the best, until your older brother performs Yibum or Chalitza, and only then could you go ahead and marry the sister. But don't do it before the older brother does Yibum or Chalitza, because otherwise you already are in a type of relationship which would preclude you from marrying the sister. But once the older brother does either marriage or Chalitza, which is sort of like a divorce, so then you know that it was specifically to that brother, and then you're allowed to marry the sister. Amar Shmuel says, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. The halacha follows the opinion of the minority view of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Now, whenever a Mishnah mentions a teaching in the name of one person, the Chacham, the sages, say the opposite of that. If a Mishnah mentions an opinion without any name, then it's a majority opinion of sages. Which if there's no name, you can also say Rav Meir is the one who taught it. Because whenever Rav Meir is mentioned in the Mishnah, halacha is not like him. But whenever a Mishnah does not mention Rav Meir, we know that a Mishnah is a Stam Mishnah, it's always going according to Rameir. Because Rameir was, they say, from among the greatest of the Tanaim. And so whenever you have a Mishnah mentioning something without, in the name of a singular opinion, you know the majority opinion is different. So the Mishnah said, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira holds that the Zika is like a marriage, is strong, and therefore you should be strict. And the sister and the brother Shimon cannot marry the sister's Asnas until the Yibam Chalitza is performed by a different brother with the widow. And Shmuel says, we listen to this minority opinion of Yehuda ben Beseira in this particular case, even though it's a minority view, because you're being stringent, you're being strict. And so from here we see that Shmuel holds at times that you can listen to a minority view if they are being stringent, if they're being strict. And therefore, when it comes to our Gemara over here, where we had two opinions, we had Rav and we had Shmuel, and we had two versions: is Rav being strict or Rav being lenient? Is Shmuel being strict? Is Shmuel being lenient? And we had a majority opinion who are being lenient, the rabbis, and the minority who is being strict, which is Rav Bivi. Reb Moina. So then Shmuel is, we know from past experience, Shmuel will be the one to go with a minority opinion, even if it's being strict. And therefore, in this case, we're talking about Megillah, which is the idea of Isuri, idea of things that are permitted, prohibited, more in the spiritual side of things, not the monetary side. And therefore, halacha in this case is like Rav. And therefore, the halacha comes out to be that if one made a very long interruption in the Megillah, they have been Yotzei, they fulfill their obligation, and they do not need to hear the Megillah again. Of course, it's preferable to hear it again, but if you're reading it yourself, do it without a bracha. So that's how the Gemara comes to the conclusion over here that who the halacha is like, which version we should go according like, and therefore we can learn it from Mesechta Megillah that Shmuel is usually more strict.
Now, the question now, admittedly, how it works actually in the Jewish community is you're having actually, lots of children, grandchildren, everything. But now you're come to think of actually widow, childless, a couple. What do we see actually in actual fact of others? This old lady. Does it mean even if she's not actually thinking of getting married, if she goes through it anyhow? It's how does it work? It means like it has to be immediately or.
So how does Chalitza work?
No, I'm saying that is we like every time actually have a childless widow. Like actually they try to go like immediately. So if enough of these cases, this childless widow actually with the brother, let's say have an old lady, right?
Yeah.
And there was no children actually with her husband, and actually meanwhile there's the brother, also an old guy, right? And let's say they're 96, neither one is really thinking of getting married. It's usual.
Saying if they don't want to get married and they want to stay in the state,
okay.
They technically could stay in that state if they want.
Yeah.
Where neither of them, will go on progress with their lives, but it's always. You want this. There's several. I think it's my own. This is my own conjecture. But you want to leave. You want to sort of calm down the neshama of the husband who passed away.
Oh yeah, that big
right.
The spiritual component. Yeah.
You want him to be at rest, meaning that his marriage is never really over yet, as long as there's a zika.
Yeah.
Right. There's a certain element of his marriage which is still continuing, and it's sort of putting her in limbo as well. Mm-hmm. And also you're causing potentially, you never know what the situation is, but it's potentially causing a michshel. Something wrong could happen if she ever gets married to somebody else. you're running into big issues then, right? She's a Shemeres Yavam.
Oh, yeah.
So
The child will be a mamzer?
I'm not sure.
Oh, no.
I'm not sure if it's Shemeres Yavam. I'm not really sure about that. I don't think so, but I don't know. I can't say that offhand. But you're running into big potential issues. It's Isser Lav for sure. I don't know if it's Isser. I don't think it's an Isser Karis. I think it's an Isser Lav.
We make them divorced?
Yeah, I think your bottom will make him get a divorce, but I don't know. I'm saying it's, I didn't look into it that deep, but I'm saying you're running into a lot of potential issues. Isser Lav, and I'm saying for the husband too. The Zika is there. What happens if one day the husband can marry her sister and he's not supposed to because
I mean, you do sometimes have actually 9-year-olds getting married. In particular, suppose actually there's a young a girl and he's actually filled with money. Actually, that's already happened, Oh.
So I'm saying it's just leaving potential pitfalls over there. I'm saying potential issues could come up. So why leave potential issues around? What I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're middle of Maimer Chafei, Maimer 25. We're middle of chapter 3. We're talking about a businessman who's in a big rush every morning. And he has no time to learn Torah, no time to study Chassidus. And we said there's different tiers. Those who push themselves hard and daven with a minyan, but they do it, with the express minyan on steroids, right? And they come late and they leave early, right? And when they daven, they aren't really concentrating on the words of davening. They're, thinking about what's going to happen next. And their tongues, their lips, their mouth moves so fast because they know the words so well. Then there's other types which only come to shul on Monday and Thursday to hear Torah reading. The kulam is natzlim. And the universal excuse is Hatzvi-Bais tirdas hapernasa ein bi'echaltem l'spal b'tzibur. Since we have to work and we cannot daven with a minyan. Befrat l'shtatif beis shir, and they say for sure we have no time to join to learn Torah, to learn a shir, shalimot together. Because their head is occupied with their business, like the famous saying of the to the Rebbe Rashab, a chassid who had a galoshes business, and he was telling all of his problems and troubles. So the Rebbe Rashab told him, "I've seen many people with their feet in galoshes. You're the first one I've seen with their head in galoshes." So he says we're head over occupied in our business. So I just don't have the capacity to even listen to the words of Torah. And this type of act, so the entire week he's living like the animal, meaning not living on a higher plane. And even worse than that, as we brought the story of the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he was in prison, saying Mishnayos by heart, and in the prison cell together with him was a calf when he was 9 years old, right? And his father told him afterwards, if you weren't saying the words of Mishnayos by heart, what difference would have been in between you and the calf? You're both sitting in prison against your will. As the Yeshaya writes in the prophet, Yada shar keneyu v'chamor evos ba'alav Yisrael lo yada ami lo yizbainan. Even a ox knows who his master and the donkey knows who his manager is, but the Jewish nation does not know who their one in charge of them is, which is Hashem. So this is somebody the whole week long. He's occupied in his business. What about Shabbos? Is Shabbos any better? Let's see. In Levadzos, if someone acts like this during the weekday, it could very much happen. You might think finally Shabbos, he doesn't have to work, doesn't have to worry about his business because there's nothing to do about it anyways on Shabbos. They are not occupied with their business. Shabbos, instead of devoting the time, now I could finally daven properly, daven like a mensch, learn like a mensch on Shabbos. He uses out his time on Shabbos for trivial pursuits. First of all, it says a whole week long they're working so hard, whether physically, whether mentally or emotionally, they're working extremely hard. And therefore comes Shabbos, and I'm wiped out. So Shabbos is a day I need to just rest. An entire day of Shabbos. Remember Rabbi Darren had a story he said once when he was my teacher in 5th grade, that he was in yeshiva in Teres Emes. He was a shliach in the yeshiva in Yerushalayim. And there was a boy in the yeshiva who went to the army. And he was coming back from basic training, and they gave him 36 hours break from the army, a 36-hour break or 48-hour break. So he walked into the dormitory room, where of his friends, the shluchim in the yeshiva in Teres Emes. He's walking in. As soon as he walks in, he's like literally staggering in, and he says, "They're killing me!" And he collapsed and he fell asleep right on the floor. And he slept straight until it was time for him to go back. In the middle, a few of the friends picked him up and put him on bed. But then he woke up and it was already time for him to get ready, daven and eat and go back already to the army. Right? So I don't think none of us are holding yet that level. In Shabbos, they said we have to rest. To understand this a little bit better, I'm going to bring you from a sikh of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which discusses this sentence over here of Kuntur Sumayin a little bit more in depth and explanation. So every single mitzvah has many layers, right? There's the layer that we see, like sort of the iceberg, right? We see just the top layer, but there's many, many more layers of depth which we don't see. There's the inner part of the mitzvah. Shabbos also, you have an outer part of Shabbos, an outer aspect of Shabbos, and a more inner, deeper aspect of Shabbos. So resting on Shabbos, sleeping on Shabbos is a mitzvah. That's all part of the external aspect, the outer aspect of Shabbos. So when a Jew goes on Friday and he goes to the mikvah and he puts on his Shabbos clothes and he goes to shul, and when he comes home from shul, he says Shalom Aleichem, and his face is happy and shining. He says Hamoitzi, he washes his hand for 2 chalas, and he has a good meal, and he goes to sleep, and he has a good sleep finally. He wakes up and he runs to shul, and he says, I need an aliyah, and he's going to do everything he could in order to get an aliyah that day. Then he comes home, he eats a big Seudah Shabbos, and he lays down, takes a nap. Afterwards, he wakes up, and he goes to mincha, and then he washes again to have shalosh seudas, 3rd meal. So this Jew fulfilled behiddur in a very meticulous way the mitzvah of minucha, of resting on Shabbos. However, Chassidus tells us, in this aspect, you should keep in mind what it says in the Aseret Adibros, the 10 Commandments. On Shabbos, you have to rest. You have to rest, and also that your animals have to rest. Your animals are also resting on Shabbos. And what's the difference between your rest and their rest? You both rested. This guarding of Shabbos, Shmir Shabbos, is the outermost aspect of Shabbos. There's also Pnimius of Shabbos, an inner part of Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe explains at the end of Tanya, on Shabbos is a day to daven with extra kavana. Shabbos is a day to spend extra time learning. The idea of not just shomer, to guard Shabbos, but zocher, to remember Shabbos. There's another rest, which is very important to do on Shabbos, which is pretty hard for a lot of us. It's resting our mouth on Shabbos, not to speak dvarim b'teil, not to speak frivolous matters on Shabbos. This is an inner aspect of shomer, of guarding Shabbos. We shouldn't speak dvarim b'teil on Shabbos. And it says in there's many mamarim, but the maimer in the year Ateres 1919, the last mimer of Parshas Behar from the Rebbe Rashab, and the Rebbe Rashab says on the pasuk, "As Shabsai Tish Shamu b'nei Yisrael as a Shabbos." Jewish people should guard Shabbos. Lasos as a Shabbos, to make Shabbos. There's two different types of Shabbos. It says in addition to that, as Shabsai Tishmeru, you should guard my Shabboses. Doesn't say as Shabbos Tishmeru. Shabbosai, Shabsai, my many Shabboses. There's many aspects of Shabbos. There's the most outer aspect of Shabbos, which is simply the rest. But to make a Shabbos, a day of Shabbos, Zachar, in passive, a active day of Shabbos, that comes by delving into elevating and to mining all the riches that Shabbos has to give to us. By learning extra Torah, saying extra Tillim, Kufyates, and davening with extra Kavanah. So we'll pause here for today. Thank you.